Hi everyone and welcome back. This is Mindy here today for lawnfawn. And a while back I had done a underwater scene using some Nuvo Moonstone Glimmer Paste. Well, this time I decided to create a magical glittery sunset. I'm going to start by creating the window for my sunset. So I just took a piece of white cardstock from lawnfawn that measures 4¼ by 5½. And I'm taking the largest out of the circle Stackables die, and I'm centering that in the middle of my cardstock, kind of more towards the top, holding that in place with some low tack tape, and then running that through my die cutting machine. Next, I'm using some black cardstock, and I'm going to die cut the palm tree border. Now you can see I took my window and I'm lining up about how high I want those palm trees to be in my window. So once again, just held those down with some Post-it tape and ran that through my die cut machine. Then I can go ahead and just remove any of the excess pieces and line that up behind my window, just kind of giving you an idea how that's going to look so far. Now I'll work on creating my background. So the Distress Oxides that I'll be using is Seedless Preserve, Abandoned Coral, and Tattered Rose. This is a beautiful sunset color you may not think of as a sunset, but once you apply the Moonstone Glimmer Paste, it really brings those colors out. So I'm just using another piece of white cardstock to do the ink blending. I'm lining up my window to just figure out where to start blending my colors. Now you can use any type of applicator you want to do your ink blending, whether it's the sponge tools, maybe you have some daubers. I'm going to be using these life-changing blender brushes, and I like to hold them towards the top or the head of the brush. That just gives me more control over the brush and where my ink is going to be. So I'm starting off with the Tattered Rose, adding just a quick layer of that, and I'll bring in my front piece just to make sure how high everything is going to be, that I have enough room for it all. Then I'll bring in the Abandoned Coral, blend a strip of that on there. And now you also want to make sure if you're bringing in your window, make sure your fingertips are clean. I have made that mistake many a times where I had a little bit of ink on there and it transfers to that white card front. So just keep mindful eye on your fingertips, make sure that they're nice and clean. And then my last color I brought in was the Seedless Preserve. And I'm just going back and forth over those lines. You really don't need to make sure there's a smooth blend, because once we put on that glimmer paste, it's going to kind of hide that. But this is just kind of habit for me to go back over those lines and blend them out. Now I did bring that Seedless Preserve down a little bit more and kind of around the edges. I kind of curved it around where my circle window was going to be. Now I'm going to bring in the magical ingredient to my sunset, which is the Moonstone Glimmer Paste from Nuvo. I'm running out in this jar, and you can see I want to point out I have some that has hardened around that edge. Try to clean yours out. I think this was my demise afterwards. Once I was editing the video, I kind of think this was my demise on my card panel, but I made it work. So I'm just scooping some of that out. And also mistake number 2, you want to start in the top corner. So I should have started in the top left-hand corner and worked my way over to the right. Because I'm right-handed, that's how I would have worked. I started in the middle. It still works, but it would have been better for this to start in the top left and work my way over. I'm just smoothing this glimmer paste across my background. Now you can see I'm leaving some sort of scratchy streak. Afterwards, and thinking about it, I think I caught some of the hardened glimmer paste on my spatula. You can clean your spatula off with a baby wipe, which is what I do. And I also smear it off on my media mat there on the side. You don't want to put this back into the jar, because since we're applying this to oxides, and oxides react with water, and this is kind of a type of mixture, so you're seeing that I am getting some color in that glimmer paste. So you don't want to put that back in the jar. Just kind of swish it off on the side. You can always pick it back up. And I'm trying to smooth this out. I did go over it a couple times, and I actually did start leaving some indentations from not smoothing it out very well, but I was stopping where I was at. I was worried that I was going to ruin this background, so I just kind of stopped. I'm going to deal with it, And I'm going to just set this off on the side to dry for a little while. So here is just a quick close-up of all that gorgeousness. Isn't that just beautiful? I love this on top of the oxides. It really brightens up those colors. So I'm going to set this off on the side to dry, and I would say, because we put so much on there, to give it at least a good hour. In the meantime, I'm going to go ahead and start working on my sentiment. So I just used the fancy wavy banner, die cut that out of black cardstock, and then I'm going to heat emboss a sentiment. So this is from the Wavy Sayings. I'm just lining that sentiment up in the middle of my banner. You can use an acrylic block to stamp this. I don't trust myself quite yet with just stamping with the block, so I'm using my MISTI tool, prepping that with an anti-static powder tool. And then I'm going to use the lawnfawn clear embossing ink to do this. So I'm inking that up really well. I'm going to close the door, and I'm tapping real light so I don't squish my sentiment. And I'm actually going to stamp it again, which is another reason why I like to use the MISTI. Then I'm going to bring in the lawnfawn white embossing powder, sprinkle that on and tap that off. Now I have about a couple jars of the white embossing powder in this little container, which is really handy. And those you can pick up anywhere in the office section or school supply section of your local stores. So then I'm just heat embossing that until it's a nice bright melted white. And I'm going to wipe off any excess powder with a Swiffer cloth, and that'll just really make that black pop and the white stand out a little bit more. I decided to give my card just a little bit of dimension, so I added foam tape to the front of my palm tree silhouette. Then I'll take my front panel and just add that right on top, lining up my corners. And that'll just kind of give the card a little bit dimension. Since we do have a lot going on with the background, I'm not going to do a lot with the front of this card. And then I'll just take my scissors and trim off any of the excess paper in case I lined that up wrong. For the sentiment, I'm also taking some foam tape, adding that to the back of the banner, and then I'll go ahead and attach that to about the center of that bottom panel. So after waiting just a little bit, my panel is nice and dry, and you can see how it really brought those colors out and really made them pop, which is going to be great for our sunset. Now I'm going to start kind of putting the card together. So I took some more foam tape, added it just to the top section of my card front, and then I added the lawnfawn double-sided tape to the bottom portion. I was a little nervous that this wouldn't stick to my textured background, so I'm taking the lawnfawn glue and adding just a little bit of that on top of the foam tape. Then I'll go ahead and attach this to my panel, just lining up my corners. And then I'll just push down and hold that for a couple extra seconds to make sure that the liquid glue is really adhering to that background. Now, because of this textured background, it did warp a little bit, so it's a little flimsy. I'm going to attach this to a card base right away. So I just took my white card base and I added some double-sided adhesive all around the corners and in the middle. And that's going to hold this down really well. It's going to flatten out that background. So once again, just lining up those corners and then giving that a good push. Then I'll give you another close-up here of that glittered sunset. Now you can see the streaks just a little bit if you look real close. But I am loving how this came out. It really pulled those colors out into a gorgeous sunset. So this is a great simple card to create. I was playing around prior to that, and this is another background I had done. Now what's funny is this is actually the same colors. This is Seedless Preserve, Abandoned Coral, and Tattered Rose. I did use some different brushes at the time, and there may have been some extra pink on there, but that Nuvo paste really brings out the colors too and the vibrancy. That finishes up my card for today. I hope you enjoyed it and will give this a try. Thanks for stopping by and have an amazing day.